Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 263. I'll mention here just at the start that I have some other Boruto/Naruto videos that I did earlier on this week. My review for chapter 72 of the manga I did on Friday, and then earlier on in the week I reviewed the newly released in English Kakashi light novel. This one is the Sixth Hokage and the Failed Prince. So if you want to know more about this book, I have a review that I did earlier in the week. But anyway, let's get into this week's episode. So we're still at the academy here. This was a relatively sort of light-hearted episode. There was nothing particularly kind of serious going on in this one. I thought the main focus of the episode would be it's Boruto, Sarada, and Mitsuki coming in to be the kind of special instructors, and that would be the entire episode. But instead, they actually just used that as like the first act setup for this argument between some of Himawari's classmates, and the actual focus of the episode was on the teacher, Hana, trying to basically bring the students back together after this feud threatens to kind of split the class in half. Again, it was over something relatively minor, but it obviously is meant to set up a little bit of a rivalry between two characters in the class, Eho and Sol. And I think from the perspective of like developing the new teacher that we have here a little bit more, it did its job quite effectively in that she demonstrated, I suppose, how earnest she is, how much she cares for her students and wants to do a good job, and just her doing all these little things to just show that she cares, even if she's not the most talented, teacher out there. The students can appreciate that she's doing everything for them, and that's ultimately what brings the group back together. It really doesn't have that much like really notable content, but it was an enjoyable watch. That's probably the main thing to say about this episode, is that like just because it was a bit low key doesn't mean it was boring. This is the sort of development you want with all these sort of new characters, actually getting to know this quite large group of new characters that we only know little bits and pieces about. So I appreciated it, even if it was relatively light in terms of what it did. Because, okay, Boruto and his team come in, and okay, they show off some of their jutsu. Boruto plays around with Kawaki a little bit of like, I'm your teacher now. I'm glad that wasn't the entire plot of the episode. I think that was a dynamic that they could have overused, but thankfully they didn't overuse. So instead they just sort of impress the students with their jutsu, and this sort of sets up a little bit of that idea of Hana feeling that she's not like quite good enough, that even these relatively young ninjas come in and have flashier jutsu than she has. She just demonstrates that she has like a little bit of wind style, of course, which she uses at the start and sort of end of the episode. But it's more of, her really committing to being their teacher here that is kind of the main point of the episode. So they eventually come up with this kind of test to be like, okay, let's do a little bit of a different take on the sort of, Kakashi bell test style thing, where like, and then the whole like depriving of food situation, where they have like a certain amount of Thunder Burgers that they bring in, but it's not enough for the whole class. And it's like, here's this game where like a certain amount of people, basically there's enough balls to match the burgers, but if you don't have one, you don't get a burger. And again, it's meant to be this sort of test of, they'll go all out to get the balls, but in the end they can share the burgers. You don't have to just eat it by yourself. And it's meant to be another one of those examples of, participate in the event as hard as possible, but in the aftermath of it, show that you care about your comrades type situation. What happens, though, that they don't account for is that in the middle of all of this, someone has a chocolate bar and starts to eat it. And when other characters see that this is happening, they make a big fuss about this. So Eho sees this, he has one of the balls, so he's going to get a burger. So he sees a bit of a problem of like, okay, you're not participating in this, you're just being like, I have a candy bar, so I'm fine. And like it's a valid point here. They should be trying to participate in the event because that's what they're doing, but there's no rules like against this technically. And then Soul comes in and is just like, let her eat the candy bar. There's no rule against it. And then there's a split of like half of the class sides with each of them. I thought it was going to be an interesting point that they would make here, where if you look at the visuals, the people supporting Eho were all the people who had the balls. There was a few people who didn't, but it was interesting that the people supporting Soul, I don't think any of them actually had one of the balls at this point. So I thought they were going to make the point there that, oh, like, of course you guys would support the idea of basically sort of like cheating on this game because you're not good enough to get the ball, and that's going to be what they went for. They didn't go for that. Instead, they just sort of went for the idea that this becomes this feud that goes beyond the game. The game pretty much like ends at that point. They don't even cover like necessarily like the idea of like who gets the food. Like everyone just sort of storms off at this point. And it's to the point where people are refusing to go to class over this issue. In that sense, like, it probably could have been written to be a little bit better, and they sort of just brush it off as like, oh, they're kids, so of course they act like this over like pretty minor situations. How they actually go about resolving it is like everyone has a little go at it, Kawaki comes in with the taiyaki, but of course they have vastly different like opinions on food. Boruto tries to have them just play the card game, but they have different opinions on who the rarest characters are. So it's just creating this idea that they seem to just naturally disagree with each other. They have a rivalry over this. And so Hana goes to each of their houses to sort of talk to them individually, and kind of plays on the idea of like with Soul, she's aware like, oh, Soul really looks up to Might Guy. What if I give her one of his his suits, his fighting suit things, and highlight that he had a rivalry with Kakashi, and that's why he got so strong, and you have a rivalry with Eho that can help you. With Eho, she brings him to the ramen shop and is kind of like, you like the Hokage, so you come here. The Hokage's like ramen. And she kind of messes up a little bit both times with the idea that like Soul likes Might Guy but doesn't like his sense of fashion. And then Eho's like, I ate before coming here. But she ends up just giving them each a letter, which is to attend this sort of like cherry blossom sort of flower viewing thing. And the big setup for like the end sequence of the episode is like, she's going to school that day and is wondering like, will anyone turn up? Will anyone actually come? This is going to be this big test of like if she has failed or not as their teacher. So everyone does turn up, and they're wondering like what this is actually about. So she has them close their eyes for the cherry blossom viewing because there aren't cherry blossoms currently. And so when they open their eyes, there are cherry blossoms, but it's revealed to just be little bits of sort of like pink paper that she's kind of blown up into the air using her wind style. And it's just this thing of like, she put in a little bit of effort and they actually like this, and they all come together for this sort of nice thing and realize that they were all being a little bit petty over this situation, and that they can acknowledge the effort that their teacher is putting in here. And that's more or less like the episode. We just kind of end on that note. And again, it's fine, but I understand if people will come out of this episode feeling that like this was a little bit of nothing, that there wasn't too much here. I can appreciate it for what it was, but obviously I'm not going to try and argue the point that this was an amazing episode. It was pretty good for what it was, is I think the best way to say it. In terms of where we're going next, next episode looks to be pretty fun. They're going to address, I suppose, some of the mysteries of the academy, like 7 mysteries that the class has to solve together. It'll be, I suppose, slightly sort of scary, kind of like spooky mystery themed. that I think should be at least fun, depending on what they are. There might be some clever little kind of tricks at play here. I guess it'll be more class bonding, and by the little shots that they focused on in the preview, it looks like they're going to highlight some of the other characters that we haven't really focused on too much in the class up to now. So yeah, I'm enjoying this arc. You know, if it goes on like exceptionally long, it might grow a little bit tiresome, but we're nowhere near that point just yet. We're only a few episodes in, and I think it's been pretty good so far. I do want to get to the main plot, and that is obviously Kay and the whole like assassination plot. What exactly is the intent with Kay as a character, and when will they bring the more plot focused stuff with her into play? She was here in this episode, but was basically more of a neutral with the other characters, or other main characters in this one. But yeah, that has been the video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. Otherwise, that's been it. Thanks for watching, and bye.